Hello, foul players, and welcome back to OWL by the Numbers, keeping you updated and in the know for all things Fantasy Overwatch League. I am your host, Simply Drunk, and opening week of the 2021 Overwatch League season is finally here. On tonight's episode, we'll be breaking down our thoughts on Draft Buff's web client, as we use that for our uh, traditional draft earlier this week or over the weekend, whatever day it was. All my days are mixed together. It was a couple of days ago. It was over the weekend. But anyways, we'll share our thoughts on that, how that went. We'll also update you on all of the latest roster news because surprise, surprise, Ed, here we are, a mere like 4 days, 3 days, whatever, away from the opening matches, and we have a late scratch, so to speak. So we'll be talking about that and how that's going to be affecting that particular team. And of course, we will get all of you guys primed for your draft royales for week number 1. So before we get into the news, I introduce you to one of my co-hosts, as the other one is fashionably late, as per the normal, because of work, all that good stuff. But let me just take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight live on Twitch, and of course thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So as you can tell, the King is back. Edidar is gracing us with
Guess
his
who's back?
presence.
Yeah, I'm back from from dealing with COVID.
hmm
No offense, I didn't listen to the episode last week because I haven't listened to any podcasts in the past 2 weeks. Just because I've been stuck in my house and I've been watching TV. But I got I don't know if you guys explained what happened, but I got the first COVID shot and then
hmm
I got COVID. So I have been out, but I am back and fully healthy. Thank God. Postpone my second shot another 90 days because I got an infusion, but I'm healthy. That's really all that freaking matters. Um, and I'm really excited for my LA Gladiators to dominate this year. Yes.
we can only hope. Because
hmm
we have gotten burned plenty of times by our selective teams in the past. But, it's a new season, new teams, anything can happen. Even like maybe Boston is going to improve the season. We'll have to wait and find out on that front. But as for last week, Ed, it's basically like 45 minutes of just Ramsey's trash talking about how you weren't there and he was, and
Yeah,
that was about the gist of it.
like Ramses, you're gonna trash talk somebody because they have COVID. Bitch move. Let's be real. So you know what? Yeah, I wish nothing but horrible things for the Houston Outlaws on you.
Well, we'll get into that later because that first matchup is going to be even more intriguing thanks to the recent news. But let's talk about what went down over the weekend. I believe it was on Sunday when we did our first traditional draft
Yep.
of this Fantasy Overwatch League season. And for
Mhm.
those that are out of the loop, if you haven't been following what Draft Buff has been up to since this past season, they did launch their web client towards the end of December of this past year. So if you are one of those guys who isn't always on your phone, or if, let's say you're at your PC and you just want to check out Draft Buff, you are able to do that and you are able to join leagues, you're able to draft leagues, all of that good stuff using their web client.
Yep.
So I know the majority of us were actually using the web client over the weekend during our draft. Then a
Mhm.
bunch of us, like more than half the league, got into Discord so we could trash talk and just talk about the picks, all of that good stuff. So, Ed, I want to get your thoughts on just the overall drafting experience, knowing that, we weren't on a mobile device in this case.
Yeah, so the web browser for drafting was actually pretty smooth. It took a little bit more exploring.
hmm
It wasn't as intuitive as you would think with a lot of other drafting sites. But once you figured out how to search for people during like other people's picks, it was good. The only thing I would ask for, and this is semi minor, is have a queue where like you can look for people and put them in a queue and be like, okay, if they're drafting, if they're available when I pick, I'm taking this person.
Right.
If not, go to the next person. So you can like queue people up while you go. Um, but otherwise it was pretty smooth. It was nice to have like I love like as far as fantasy drafts goes, I love drafting on a computer.
Hmm.
But when it comes to like weekly things during the year, I use mobile.
Right.
It's legit just the draft that I'm kind of you know, I need that in front of me. I can't just sit there on my phone.
Hmm.
And that did wonders for me because like even looking at the website now, like after the draft, it's pretty bad. Um, like I'm not even allowed to change starters on the draft buff website.
Okay.
Um, so it's definitely something where it's very heavily focused on the draft aspect of it and then use the app for everything
Mhm.
else, which again I'm totally okay with, but I think they need to have some very basic functions on the website for it to go well. Like I can't switch out to you with hotba
Mhm.
on the website. I have to do that on my app.
Yeah, and it is worth mentioning that this was an app first. That was their heavy focus
Yep.
across all of their esports titles, and then the website stuff came a lot later into that stage.
Hmm.
So this is basically just like the groundwork being established on the draft buff side of things. And like there were obviously like other things that could be implemented just to make that process smoother. I will say, like, as a whole, like the transitions in between rounds were automatic. We didn't have any hiccups
Oh
in
yeah.
in regards to that. And you were kind of able to like switch between the rounds to see who picked what, and like if you picked on whoever's pick at the time, just selecting someone's team, it would show their entire roster leading up to that point, and you could actually see what they were still missing every step of the way. Now that being said, like, let's say you are someone that also uses the mobile app and you have notifications turned on. Now, I personally don't have notifications set on
Oh
my
god, I
phone,
did.
but
I did.
but there were plenty of comments about how after every pick, even though we were drafting online, you kept getting notifications after every pick of the draft. So that is
Yeah,
definitely
and
something to note.
yeah, like definitely if you're doing a draft and you have your phone and you're doing it on the web, silence notifications on your phone because you will get a notification for every single person's draft pick.
Mhm.
So that's definitely something that is an annoyance. Which again, I don't. Again, like dealing with iPhones and Androids and notifications and apps and stuff like that. I don't know what all goes into it, but just silence your phone. Like that's the best thing I can say to you.
Yeah, really the only other takeaway that I had, at least from like a PC player, with the draft experience, is not really having those sort of notifications on PC. Like there wasn't really an alert or anything if time was
Mm.
going low or if you were next in line or if it was your turn to draft or anything like that. But all in all, for like a
You
first
didn't
time,
get the ESPN dun-dun-dun,
no,
dun-dun
no, not
every time you're
nothing like
on
that.
deck.
Nope. But for a first time experience, I thought it still went pretty well, and I'm sure like over the course of the season or like leading into next season, they'll be adding more on the web client front. But
Mhm.
obviously, their big focus is just the overall experience using the app because that is what they are known for. Now, outside of that, I do want to mention because we do have a lot of players who played on highnoon.gg this past season. High Noon is not active for this season. So
That's unfortunate.
Draft Buff is basically the go-to at this point. I haven't touched base with Owl as of yet in regards to daily contests using fantasyowl.com. So I'll have to reach out to him and see if he's still doing his thing. But for now, just have the assumption that Draft Buff is going to be the go-to platform, which,
Yep.
in our case is going to be where we're going to be having all our contests, which are live as of this point. And you can find all of the league links within our show notes, as well as on our Twitter page as well. So we'll be tweeting all that stuff out at the start of each week, on top of a couple of other things that we need to talk about. So, very recently we had the launch of an official Overwatch League pick'em on the
Hmm.
Overwatch League website. And what's great about this is we are able to create private leaderboards, and we do have one set up for the podcast. We'll have the join information there. We do have a password that will also be in the show notes. But basically, the way that this is going to work is that the players are going to be earning points by predicting the winning team and the final score of each match throughout the season. So if you correctly predict the winner, you get 2 points. If you get the exact map score, you get 1 point. And then we also have 2 points for correctly predicting the Knockout Sunday team that is going to be advancing in the tournaments. Now, I did see on the About page that there was a mention of double point matches, and I'm not exactly positive how often those are going to be. Maybe that's going to be kind of like more of a tournament thing. Maybe it's kind of like a once a week thing. I don't know the gist there, but obviously double points means you're going to earn twice as many, regardless of what you get right. So good catch up mechanism in that case, should you correctly guess there. And we do have prizes that are going to be awarded to the top players. And this is on a tournament cycle. So there's 4 different tournaments throughout the season, and they are giving away prizes to the top 3. Your top prize is a May statue as well as $500 USD. Second prize being the May statue and $100 USD, with the third prize being $50. So all in all, like, you and I have been waiting for, really just anything semi-related to fantasy through the Overwatch League at this point. So this is the first step, but we have such a long way to go leading up to this. But
Hmm.
it's good for us in the sense that at this point, for this type of this platform, like, we actually have an alternative now, because High Noon did their pickums this past season, and prior to that, they kind of dissolved, and now we have an official platform for pickums. So it's good to see that someone did pick that helm up, and for it to come through the Overwatch League themselves is always great to see. But that being said, Ed, I know you submitted your picks earlier, and you and I kind of ran into the same issue when we submitted our picks initially. So why don't you talk about your experience doing that just before the podcast tonight?
So, all right. I hate the fact that they're calling it a pick 'em. Because you're not just picking a winner.
Hmm.
You are predicting the score. You're predicting the winner, but you're also predicting the score, which takes into account. That's very much nitpicking on my account. This is not just a pick 'em league.
Hmm.
It's not like it was at high noon or anything like that. It's you actually have to predict the scores. But I went through and, be careful. I went through and I put the scores in and then I hit save predictions. But if you're not logged in, it won't save any of the predictions. So you need to make sure you're logged in first on the Overwatch League.com website. And then you need to put in your scores and save your predictions. Also, they let you put in the scores for week 2 and 3. For the love of God, don't do that yet. You have no idea what's going on.
Hmm.
Like, I'd say 50% of everything we predict for winners this week is wrong. Because we just don't know what's going on in the Overwatch League and what teams are actually good. So don't fill it out in advance. But it's nice that the Overwatch League is actually embracing a little bit of fantasy. Um, I you know This is, I mean, granted, it's just a pick'em league, but
Mhm.
it's, and I can't argue with them on this. It's overall a good benefit for the Overwatch fan base.
Absolutely. And yeah, just the fact that you're able to like pick, 3 weeks leading into like the knockout stage. I'm just like, I'm not going to go through that effort.
Mhm.
So, when you're saying don't pick in advance, you're talking about the week ahead of time, not like, it's a Monday, league matches are coming up here.
Yeah, like, it's letting me be like, "Hey, week 2, Paris versus the Titans." Well, I
Mhm.
don't know how if the Titans are any good or not. Probably not. But, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's one of those things where we just don't know.
Mhm.
Who knows? Dallas Fuel may be complete trash. Um, Boston Uprising may be great. Houston Outlaws may be horrible. Like, we just don't know about any of these teams yet. So don't jump ahead to conclusions if you don't have to.
Mhm.
So don't put in your week 2 or your week through 3 picks at this point.
Right. And it is worth noting too, you're predicting every game of every week.
Yeah,
So if you're someone who's looking to rack up as many points as possible, or if you're competitive and you're looking to get those top prizes, make sure you are predicting all of the games. Don't overlook anything in this case, which is even more of a reason not to predict ahead going into that following week.
right.
But yeah, it's like I'm so happy that we at least have something directly through the Overwatch League. I know they were talking
Mhm.
about doing like power rankings, and they kind of partnered with IBM for that. So those are supposed to be, I want to say they're supposed to be released weekly on the Overwatch League website. So I'm curious to see how all of that is going to unfold. But with opening week being here, it's not too late to have some news bombs dropping on us here, because we had a couple of things that definitely came into play
Yes.
directly into our draft over this past weekend. So last week, Ramses and I had been talking about the visa issues that the Philadelphia Fusion have been dealing with their non-Korean talent, which was affecting up to 4 players on their active roster, which at the time was half of their team. Now, since then, they have brought back Hotba on Flex Tank, or Tracer, depending on what meta it was. Primarily Flex Tank.
Which
So he's
I'm
coming
telling
in
you right now, if you had a fantasy draft and
mhm,
nobody picked him, pick him up.
immediately.
Guaranteed flex tank for a decent team.
hmm
Pick him up in a heartbeat.
Absolutely, because he was someone that definitely kind of fell through the cracks, and you scooped him up, which then led to
Mhm.
me being like, "Oh wait, that's right. They had another sign-in as Ramses is joining us. Let me
Hey,
let me swap
Ramses is
over.
here.
Hey, it's a Ramses finally joining us. Imagine that."
I had work. This was I literally ended our last episode saying, "Yeah, I will most likely be always here at 6:30." And yours like, "What? Ramsey's late? No way! Oh man!
Imagine
Ramses
that.
late all
At
the
least I showed up. I mean, I showed up for our
really?
launch podcast. What did you do,
Really?
Ed?
You're gonna blame me for having COVID?
Mhm.
Ed, you would have done the exact same for me. Do not even
Not if
pretend
you
you
had
wouldn't.
COVID.
Yes,
Not
you
if
would
you
have.
had COVID.
Yes, you would have.
Anything
Totem, impartial
other than
judge.
COVID,
Impartial,
anything other than COVID, I would have blamed
totem,
you for.
All right. Well, now
But
totem.
COVID, yeah, come on. Come on.
Okay.
Ramsey's nice of you
Yeah.
to join us. We were just
Happy to be
talking
here.
about the Philadelphia Fusion adding Hotba to their starting lineup. After we had previously talked about their visa issues, and Ed scooped Hotba
Mhm.
up, which
Mhm.
then made me think, oh shit, that's right. They did also add another main support. And then what did I end up doing? I ended up taking Toby. I think like it was a round after that. At that point in time, so
Mhm.
Toby, the Boop God, back in the Overwatch League, now with the
He
Philadelphia
lives.
Fusion. And, with how much brawl compositions are going on, Toby might not be a terrible fantasy option moving forward. So, really good to see another former Dynasty player back within the league. But I have to say, guys, obviously kind of going in, we had the storyline of Fusion and Korea and just the history there. Now they have swapped to basically an all-Korean roster at this point in time. How much has your perception of the Philadelphia Fusion changed in regards to how well you think this team is going to fare now that they have addressed some of the issues that they had been dealing with this past week alone?
Well, okay, go Ramses.
No, I was pointing you. You go.
Okay, and on my camera you're pointing towards Totem. But so here's the thing: is I think Fusion are actually what they did is pretty well set up because you still now have a DPS lineup of Carpe and Rascal. Because you do lose EQO and Shockwave due to visa issues, but Carpe and Rascal, not a bad DPS combo. And then you get Toby instead of Funny Astro, but you still have Alarm. So you still have that super strong support lineup. And then you have Mono joining Hotba. And that to me is a good tank lineup. Like they replaced the people they couldn't get visas for with slightly equal, like talent wise, maybe slightly below, but not too much. Like Toby, how far below Toby is or how much below Funny Astro is Toby?
I think it's a
well, and that's I don't know if I would go that far, but like that's the biggest disparity, and even then, it is not by much at all. It's like by maybe it's like a 1 to 5,
right?
Like differentiation.
I mean, arguably they got better at DPS. Like I would take Rascal over EQ and Shockwave.
I might take Shockwave. We'll see, but like
you know what I mean? Like Carpe Rascal DPS is pretty ridiculous.
Well, and so there is something that should be said in there too, because I think the people like my mind immediately wants to go like, well, it's gonna take them a little bit of time, like to get used to synchronicity and to get used to teams and everything, and that'll be true for like probably maybe like Rascal's been in there for a while. I assume this didn't happen literally yesterday. I assume these guys have been practicing with them for a little bit.
Same with Hotba.
Mono and Hotba have played together last year too.
Yep.
So they have synchronicity there. Hotba already. I mean, they have a different coach this year, so like it's still getting to work with that system. But like, Hoppa at least is familiar with Carpe. I'm sure. Like, I think they moved down probably a spot. It's not like they're going to tumble down, but like I think they moved down a spot to where I would still probably call them upper mid card.
I think to me they're still a top 18.
I think so as well. I don't think they're like a solid. I don't think they're the for sure number 2 in APAC. I think they're probably. I'm comfortable putting them like at a 3, maybe flexing up into that 2, depending on how everybody plays this weekend.
Yeah, I think with these changes, Seoul moved above Philly for me in APAC. As the number 2 team, but. This is not a bad team. If you told me right now that the Philly team coming out won APAC, I wouldn't actually not be surprised. Like, because they're not a bad team. And honestly, fantasy wise, all 6 of the starters on that team are worthy of being on a fantasy roster.
Yes. As far as setting expectations, just to make I don't think Toby's going to be the same kind of like score person as Funny Astro is. Not by like not Funny Astro. I think there was 2 weeks he was like number 1, number 2. Like,
yeah. The problem is we don't know the breakdown that's going to happen. So, I mean, you don't know who's going to be your BAP player. Because right now Baptiste is 100% meta. 100% meta, and you don't know who is going to be performing on the Baptiste or not.
Other point to make as well, Philadelphia is playing two teams I think are great fantasy matchups for them. You're playing Seoul, who I would argue is probably going to be neck and neck as far as like, and that's the kind of matchup you want. You want a matchup that goes the full 5 maps where people are trading back and forth rather than a full stomp. And then they're playing the Valiant the next day.
God, that's a 3-0.
Yeah. So like, I think you're going to get solid numbers this weekend out of Philly, guys.
Yeah, you're gonna have good numbers out of Philly. It's definitely going to be interesting. I think supports, and this is all throughout the whole league, is I don't know if I trust flex supports a little bit more, but I don't know how teams are going to be handling the Baptiste. Like whether your flex support takes it or if your main support takes it. Like if you go Bap Anna, who's going to be on which?
Rascal's playing Baptiste.
No, he has
Rascal's
to play
playing
DPS.
Baptiste.
He
Rascal's
has to play
playing
DPS.
They're gonna.
Who's going to be the DPS then?
Hotba.
Huh? Yeah, it's covered. It's
Then
already
who's going to
done.
be the tank?
Okay, now I can't.
Ryu Jae Hong out of
There you go.
retirement.
There you
Yeah, to
go.
play monkey.
It's one of those things where I don't know
Mhm.
what teams are going to be doing. It's from a fantasy perspective, and I mentioned this a little bit during our live draft this past weekend. Is right now you need your Zarya and you need your Baptiste players. Those are going to be your heavy hitters.
We have heard rumblings that Diva is making a comeback as well.
Could
Which
be,
is-
but
And that's something to keep an eye on because if Diva comes back, I would argue your numbers for off tanks go down by a lot.
Right. Because at that point they're focusing a little bit more on ult mitigation.
Yeah.
Like you're relying on ult kills and poke damage rather than anything else.
Mhm.
But if it is Zarya and Baptiste, then I mean that's why I'm gonna name drop here, but Fielder to me is probably the number one support. If Baptiste is in the meta, Fielder to me is the number one support in the league.
Now, how bummed are you going to be if Repel comes in?
Nope.
And he's playing that role.
Fielder's Baptiste is ridiculous.
I still think it's gonna be Violet and Alarm topping.
I think so as well.
Alarm,
I mean,
yes. Violet. Okay, here's the thing though. What if, like, I'm not ready to say Violet just because they freaking have Twilight.
Mm-hmm.
It's like maybe if Anna's in, they like meta, they play Twilight instead of Violet.
Right.
That's the only something like that. That's the only reason I won't say Violet. Alarm, I'll give you Alarm. But Violet, I'm iffy just because of Twilight, because that is way too much skill to be your backup support.
Mm-hmm. So outside of that, we also had a player quote retiring due to some health issues, and that is the Dallas Fuel DPS player XZ. All right, so this happened today. Like this is happening very close to the start of the season. A lot of drafts have already been done. A lot of players have drafted XZ. So this is gonna be one of those things where you're going to have to make an adjustment. You're gonna have to go to the waiver wire, and I know a lot of Dallas Fuel fans are looking at this, and we constantly talk about the fuel cycle of misery, and you could already start to hear the rumblings of the panic being caused by this. Now, it's important to note, yes, this is the core of Element Mystic. They do have a hit scan problem right now. That is without question, but I don't want everyone to hit that panic button just yet, because, this is a team who found great success off of their Hackfist compositions. Doomfist has been seen quite prevalently in the meta, so you can expect to see Sparkle and Doha just tearing things up. But, you have to assume Dallas is going to have to bring in a hit scan specialist. And I know a ton of names have already been thrown out. But I think the biggest question mark right now is, are they going to sign a Korean talent knowing that we have had some visa issues within the league? Or the alternative is, will they go out to one of these all-Korean teams that are based in NA and try to make a trade? So from that perspective, there are two particular players that would probably come to mind first before any other. You're talking about the Houston Outlaws, potentially, having the fuel trade for Happy, or the
I don't
other
know if they give
player.
up Happy though.
Yeah, the other player in question would be Jerry from the Washington Justice.
Jerry on the Dallas Fuel, I would buy that jersey immediately. Oh, can you imagine?
Okay, so I actually thought of two different people
Right, but there aren't.
than
I do want
what
to
you
preface.
brought up.
I do want to preface. There aren't a ton of teams that have more than 3 DPS.
Now, okay, so my first, like, if I was Dallas, and so I want to reiterate this, is Xe is not retired. He did not retire.
He said retired, but that's not exactly what he meant.
He
Like it's a
flat
medical
out
leave of
said
absence.
It's a medical leave of absence because he's having
Yeah.
back issues, and he said he is more than, if it's fixed, he's more than capable of coming back to pro esports. Granted, probably not this year, but I just want to make that point. There are two things that popped into my head right away. The first one was trade for Glister from the Shock.
Mm.
You have the Korean aspect with Glister, and it's not like Glister, like, we don't know. Glister could not even be part of their plans. Like, they could just be like, we're gonna go Striker Nero or something like that. The Shock have the DPS to get rid of someone. So Glister to me is the number one choice. Okay. Second choice would be I Am 37 from the Boston Uprising.
That would be terrible for Boston, though, since you would be heavily reliant on color hex.
It would.
Oh,
You
but
would have
Huck gets to
and
make a deal
Valentine.
though. Huck gets to make a deal, and at that point, can Huck physically stop himself from turning away a deal like that?
It's one of those things. Those are the two that popped out in my head right away. Now, Harsha did say they will be bringing in, and they have been screaming hit scan players.
Yes.
So it's not like are they going to bring in? No, they are bringing one in. The owner flat out said they're going to bring someone in. If they get Glister, I think it's a wash. Maybe slightly better. Glister, like, me and Totem, I know for sure, were pretty high on Glister coming into last year. He just unfortunately was on the Spitfire. And got kind of shat on that way. But I think Glister would be the perfect replacement for the Dallas Fuel. Perfect replacement.
Well, because Glister as well, you need somebody for, like, because Xe's your long range guy. But even then, like, because wasn't Doha playing Ash for them last year too?
Mm-hmm.
I would go in just with the assumption, like, they're gonna run Sparkle and Doha this weekend.
Oh yeah, they'll probably play them this weekend.
I mean, and there's some contenders names that have been thrown around. I know Sigma is the one that kind of has gotten brought up, but Sigma the player, not the character. But
who's the one that you mentioned, Totem?
Innovation from Team
Innovation.
CC. Yeah, he would.
If they could get Innovation, bro. No, don't you see? This is it. The final redemption arc. Dia coming from the heavens with the steel chair to come over and take over the long range hit scan role.
Now the thing is
you're not getting him out of help. Oh, of course, and that's the whole thing with all this, is it has to be somebody who's already in NA, most likely, or else they're not going to get here till like late summer, if that.
Yeah, exactly. So like the visa issues is the main issue. That's why I picked Glister. Because the Shock already have Striker, Teo, and Nero. They could probably spare Glister and charge a hefty penny. So yeah.
Yeah, I know there's been discussion even in our Discord about, well, like, why would you trade someone to like a rival team and things like that? And people seem to forget that that's not an uncommon thing, even in
No.
traditional sports.
No. Like now in the NFL, you generally don't trade your interdivisional,
Hmm.
but that's different than like the Packers and the Bears don't trade with each other. But that's not the same as like what happens in the Overwatch League. It's just
Generally,
not.
people in Overwatch League don't care. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the divisional stuff is not as important in the Overwatch League as it is in, let's say, football, baseball. You know what I mean? Like who doesn't. If that was the case, then no NA teams would ever trade with each other, and that would
Mhm.
be boring as shit.
It will be interesting to see how Fuel kind of run this weekend. It definitely, I feel like such a freaking vulture saying this, but like, it definitely boosts some Houston picks for me as far as who you're picking for this weekend, or even Gladiators is probably even better, but like Houston, I think is just that little bit more competitive, where those picks look a little bit better.
Still picking Fuel over Houston.
Oh no, I'm saying as far as picking players.
Oh, okay.
Picking fantasy players. I'm picking Houston over Dallas literally because my gut
Because
wants
you're
to
a
get
fanboy.
I want to get one right. I want to get one out. I don't know if you guys remember last year where you and were just like, all right, Ramsey's Bob argue about this. It was like, yeah, Dallas is gonna win for sure. Like, why are we fighting over this? So no, the Houston players are a little bit more appetizing to me for this week. But it's literally only for that Dallas matchup because they are playing San Francisco like the next day.
Yep. Though, like, to me, I'm sorry, the only Houston Outlaw player worth taking right now is Dante.
There's three. There's
Ooh.
three that are worth taking. And one of them is my budget pick. We'll talk about in a little bit.
All right.
All right, so now that we got that out of the way, obviously week one is here. Everyone's probably still in the process of setting up their draft royales for the week. So I want to go around. We don't know what meta we're exactly going to be seeing, but if the winter ball or whatever the heck it was is any indicator, we might be seeing a ton of Sombra, a ton of Doomfist, some Echo.
Tracer's been popular. We've been hearing
Tracer,
too.
a lot of like dive sort of compositional heroes at this point in time. So who are your must starts for week one? And I know one of the names definitely comes to my mind right now for that type of meta is going to be Kevster, who is 68 points for the cost out of the Gladiators. I'm expecting big things from him. He was popping off in the exhibition match, but just that sort of playstyle fits him to a T.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kevster definitely is one of those big names. For me, I think I've kind of mentioned it enough this episode, but my two are Decay, because I think Zarya is going to be big, and Decay statistically last year was the best Zarya in the league. Who's still in the league?
And even if he doesn't play Zarya, like he's still gonna frag the heck out.
Exactly. Like even if they're not playing Zarya, Decay is still so.
Now,
Decay
Edward,
is probably my number one.
Edward, Decay's not playing this week, right?
Yes. Oh shit.
Justice
I
aren't playing
always
this week.
forget that. Yeah. That's so. And I hate doing that. But um, after him, Fielder would be my number one support, which I brought up earlier in the. And I think that's more of a Baptiste play. I'm really hoping for. God, must starts for the week. Dante. Dante would probably have to be a must start for me.
I agree with you there. Dante is the one. Please don't be stupid, Harsher and Youngblood. Like Dante's the one guy you
There's
have
no
to keep
way
in there.
they don't play Dante.
No, he like. Oh, man, I'm telling you, Saturday afternoon. No, it was a Friday. Friday, you guys are just gonna send me a flood of messages like "LOL hydrations on Farah," "LOL hydrations on Farah," and like that's just, man. Dante, you have to. Dante's your guy. I love Dante for this weekend for that Dallas Fuel matchup.
I'm pretty sure I picked Dante in every single draft royale.
See, I did one with a different guy. I picked Yaki for every single draft royale I'm in this weekend. I think this is the year of Yaki dominance. I think Yaki actually moves into the number one
Like
DPS.
Yaki was shit last year.
No, this is the number one DPS in the world. Yaki, I think that we're going to see this year.
Okay. So you're saying Yaki's the best player in the league.
I think he's going to make that jump to best DPS in the league. He's got a couple good matchups. That Atlanta matchup, I think, is going to be really solid because, again, I'm looking for what's going to go the most maps and what's going to go for the longest amount of time. And I really think that between these two guys, they're going to go far. I also think Yaki's probably going to stay in much longer than. I think if between him, BQB, and Checkmate, I think Yaki's going to be your guy who stays in the whole time. And then, worst comes to worst, if they just crush Vancouver, you'll get some good stats out of that. Looking around as well, I think everybody on the Gladiators, Kevster's a good call. Birdering 100% is like, I think, the number one DPS, and they're still for a reason. And then Moth is startable as a main support. Shu is an elite level flex support. So is
what do you think? All right, as a Houston fan, what do you think of KSF?
I like KSF. I'm one of apparently a very small minority that like really thinks he's good. Maybe that's just Howler in my ear talking again. But KSF's all right. He's gonna come in though, like as he is a very weird hero pool. He fits the same stuff that Dante does, unfortunately. Which, like, I understand why you brought him in, but I don't feel like I don't think of any sort of hero pool where you would put him in over Dante. Because, like, he plays similar, like, he plays the Genji, he plays the Widow, but when are you going to put him on Widow? Because you have Happy there. He plays Pharah, which, like, you should put him on Pharah, in my opinion, over Hydration. Like, I'd take Dante Doomfist over the Hydration Doomfist. Like, I like KSF. I'm interested to see what they do with him. I still would prefer to get Nero if we had been able to finalize that deal.
Right. Yeah, just looking at like the matches though, I really like the Dynasty matches this week. They play the Philadelphia Fusion, and then on Sunday they face the Guangzhou Charge. But I think like as a whole, the Dynasty matchups as well as the Gladiator matchups from a fantasy perspective are probably going to bring the most bang for your buck. But I'm with you, Ramses. Like that Atlanta-Florida matchup is probably one of my more anticipated ones. We've heard a lot in regards to the Scrimbucks about like what people's expectations are for Atlanta. Apparently they've been performing well, but this is the Mayhem who have just kind of been stomping on them throughout 2020. I don't think the Reign have beat Florida since like 2019 at this point in time, but like those series are always hyper competitive, so that's definitely one to keep an eye on. But there are definitely teams out there who, right now it's just really hard to see the performance level just based off of the expectations that we have on them. So we're talking about teams like Vancouver Titans are probably one that definitely come to mind where maybe they'll take a map here or there, but like our expectations for that particular team are extremely tempered because a lot of us are expecting them to be kind of like on that bottom run of the ladder throughout the Overwatch League. So I know there are a lot of good options this week, but you look at the costs and a lot of the good DPS options that the names that we're going to be throwing out, a lot of them are going to be like 70 plus coins.
Yeah.
So you need to balance that off where, like, say when you're going to your tanks, you're looking at stuff in the 50s range. Because off tanks themselves can also kind of get pretty expensive as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this: when it comes to cost saving, the best cost saving player that you can get is Crystal. I like. Let's be real. Like, the Valiant are playing 2 games this week.
Mhm.
They're obviously not good, but he is 100% playing every game, and he is ridiculously cheap.
He's at 34 coins. You
Which
mentioned
is,
before.
like half of what you like the average you would spend on a player.
It's cheaper than like 70% of the DPS options.
Exactly. Like, I think if you're doing a budget, you start with Crystal.
I think all of us are in our budget league.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly, because it's just smart. Like,
Yeah, no, I mean,
like
even Melandrin, his DPS partner, is 31. Hell, you could buy both of the Valiant DPS, and then just
And-
spend like 70 on like literally every other position on your team.
exactly. And the thing is, they're both playing. Like,
Mhm.
that's a very big thing, is they're both gonna, like, neither one of them's gonna be benched.
Another budget option. I know I have starting in a couple different leagues. Piggy is only 43 coins, and he's for sure starting. And they're playing Dallas, so I think that's going to be a decent game. This is going to be the 1 week you get to enjoy Piggy being cheap, because as soon as this week is over, he's probably going back up to the 50s range.
Well,
That could be good. What do you think about Fire from Vancouver?
You know, any Titans player definitely scares me. But you know, if you're talking from a budget perspective, Vancouver as a whole is relatively cheap. But I don't know if I would take Fire over someone like say Juby, who is 40 points for the Houston Outlaws, or even like if you want to go a little bit higher than that, you know, Slime is under that 50 cut for you know the Florida Mayhem as well, or even like Animo,
Mhm.
who was also in the mid 40s. So I think from that perspective, you just have
My
better
slime.
options that are, you know, a couple of currency higher or relatively about the same cost there.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see what happens. It's the thing is
If you want to
half,
go really,
half these players probably
if you really want to
won't
skim,
start. Like, let's be real, half these players might not even start.
am I back from the robot abyss yet?
I mean, I can hear you just okay.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
hear you fine.
One more Valiant option, if you really want to save as well, Wia is 36 points or 38 points. He's
Yeah.
36 points. If you want to flex support in there, again, he is going to play. He is going to be there. So this, unfortunately, it's hard to set expectations this week outside of like the crazy obvious teams, because we have no idea, especially with the mid card of APAC, how anything is going to shape up.
Yeah, because you look at who the Valiant are playing, they open up their season against the Chengdu Hunters. And then they play the following day against the Philadelphia Fusion. So I guess the real question is, what are your expectations for them from a map perspective? Is this going to be a team that is going to get 3-0'd this week? Or are they going to take a map here or there? Because, you know, right now, you know, the general consensus throughout a lot of the fans is that the Valiant are going to be the bottom team of the league, regardless of if we're talking fantasy or just traditional records for esports.
I think they take a map off of Chengdu this week.
Yeah, I think they could take a map off Chengdu, and then they play. God, who is it that
The Fusion.
played?
Or the second
Fusion.
game.
Yeah, I don't think they take anything off Fusion.
Mm.
Like right now, I have Chengdu beating them 3-1, and then Fusion beating them 3-0.
Mhm.
Like, and I think that's realistic.
I have to say,
They're such a bad team.
Oh, I do wonder as well, if there is somebody who I'm probably the most scared to touch in this league, it is, I think it's High B at main support.
okay.
Literally because my man was a off tank who has made the Overwatch League jump to main support. Also, I did want to get your guys' opinions. For a lot of the draft royale stuff, you have to pick an actual team to throw in there as well. We haven't really talked about it that much. Where do you guys stand as far as picking teams for weekends? Do you want to pick ones that, like, how are you willing to spend on picking an individual team?
I guess it all depends on like what the team score and actually involves.
Yeah, the one thing with teams right now that I notice is that the price is not that drastic between the top teams and the bottom teams.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like a 5 to 6 point difference.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, I'm not gonna worry about this that much because, like, okay, if I have the points, I'll take the shock. If I don't have the points, I'll take the Dallas Fuel.
Mhm.
Like, and to me, that's not that drastic of a difference. You know what I mean? So it's like the points for the teams need to be stretched out more for it to actually matter to me.
And just speaking of teams, another thing that we saw in the traditional draft was that you are able to select teams in traditional leagues as well, which kind of threw us all for a loop.
It was a meme because I was like, you know what? What if?
What if?
I'm just gonna throw this and see, like, and then I went back to the roster afterwards. I was like, oh no, we don't have team scoring in our matchups. Okay, I'm gonna let go. So teams do not have any sort of presence in your normal drafts. We didn't even do. We're running something a little bit different where we're doing a hybrid of, like, if people are familiar with dynasty leagues, typically in a dynasty fantasy football league, you would play for the year, and then at the end of the year, you have a certain amount of players you can keep that are going to transfer to your team following the next year. We chose to do that with the monthly tournament schedules just to see what would happen. I'm really interested to see, like, what rounds look like. So I do wonder how that's going to go because, like, I think about there's picks that, like, Ed's made in the past couple of years that were garbage at the beginning, and that not garbage. Like, there are people you've picked up in free agency that have gone on to be, like, huge point getters. So I wonder.
Oh, like when I picked up Sinatra,
Yeah,
season 2. Yeah, that worked out well.
I was trying to avoid the name, but
yeah, he who must not be named.
Well,
Number
now.
4. I think it's number 4 in the Overwatch League. He who must not be named.
Yeah, we're
I mean, the same thing happened 2 years ago. That happened with last year that happened with Baby Bay, right? Where, like, Baby Bay went undrafted, and then Baby Bay got, like, a ton of, like, I think Baby Bay had a ton of freaking points for the 2 months he played.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh man.
I do wonder though, because they really treated us this weekend. There's a lot of really good matchups. I think we only are going to get, like, one Battle of Texas this year. Like, that's for sure confirmed. So it's the first matchup, and then the fact that we also get Glad's Shock happening the same day is, like, they put, like, it feels like they put their two biggest matches of the weekend, like, right at the front.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Everyone has such high expectations for San Francisco Shock this season to potentially see that repeat, but this is a team who has a knack for not winning that first match. So, like, I look at that and I was like, oh man, here we go. History's going to repeat itself. I'm picking the Gladiators over the Shock in this case, but, I do feel like that is going to be one of the better matchups in regards to overall map scores. I'm expecting it to go the distance in this case. But yeah, definitely a front-loaded weekend, especially on the NA side of the Overwatch League. But, I couldn't think of a better way to, like, kick off the 2021 season than by, the Battle of Texas, which is always entertaining in its own right. And now we have what remains of the California Cup now that one of the teams is over in China.
Well, and it was funny, dude. They did the California Cup, but they didn't even have the other LA team. So it's like,
yeah.
So I mean,
LA.
I think it's very obvious where I stand in the Houston versus Dallas matchup, but I want to get your guys' thoughts. Totem, I think we already know. You've already said. Totem, do you think what do you think has to happen for Houston to actually take this? Because I think most people would agree this looks like a Dallas win.
This is very hard to say because I'm under the assumption that Dallas is going to use their bread and butter in regards to their Element Mystic days of bringing out the Sombra Doomfist or maybe Sombra Echo. And if that's the case, then we're going to have to see probably some McCree play out of the Outlaws. But it's just one of those things because this past season the Outlaws kind of had like their set strategy on control that never really paid off. So for me, the biggest question for the Houston Outlaws is can they kind of erase that thing that has been constantly been biting them in the ass where maybe they could have a little bit more headway on that particular map type because when you're coming out of the gates and you're already finding yourself in a deficit, you're talking about a really hard thing to kind of like dig your way out of, knowing that you are already at a disadvantage, but you're also going up against a team who a lot of people perceive to be better than you at that point. So if I'm the Houston Outlaws, I say you have to win control. You have to get that momentum, but you're going to have to rely on the McCree in order to shut down the Sombra play of Doha. Because otherwise, this one, I personally have it 3-1 in favor of Dallas. But I expect better things from the Outlaws just as a whole this season. But the McCree play has to be there, and it can't just be kind of like a wash on the hit scan, kind of like what we saw this past season.
Ed, do you have a comment?
Nope, I'm gonna agree with Totem on this. I have a 3-1 Dallas win on this one, even without XC. I just Dallas is just too stacked right now.
You can't be blamed for thinking it. I mean, I've thought about this, especially with XC gone. I think if you could force it into some sort of Widow duel, or you'd have to I think the best way to win is you have to force it into a long range hit scan battle. Now, if Houston is actually able to do that, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's a whole
I doubt they
different.
practice. So, I mean, maybe you just run a rush comp and you just stick XE on Widow and have him sit. Not XE, you just stick Happy on Widow and have him just sit in the back of the map and hope that he gets somebody. But I think the other match is going to be a little bit more contentious. LA Gladiators versus the San Francisco Shock, our other match on Friday.
Yeah.
I would argue this is the best LA Gladiators team we have seen so far.
Yes.
However, the Shock haven't gotten any worse. Like the Shock are still the clear cut best team in the world.
It's yeah. I completely agree. Like as a Gladiators fan, like
as a recent Gladiators
fan, because they got my boy Moth and they got the Shoe Train. Choo choo. They probably have the best support lineup in Overwatch.
Ed, I didn't know you were a Toronto esports fan.
Yeah. But Moth and Shoe is probably the best support lineup in the league. The only team who could probably compete with them is the San Francisco Shock, sadly enough. And it's just like the Gladiators, I think across the board is everyone's like number 3 team in the league behind the Shock and the Dragons.
Shanghai,
yeah. And I can't make an argument for the Gladiators being better than the Shock. I just can't at this point. I mean,
blunders.
Yeah,
By the Shock.
Like to me, I have the Shock winning this 3-1.
Okay.
Personally, and that's as a Gladiators fan, I'm like, yeah, no, Shock are probably going to win this 3-1.
I think if it's a brawl comp or a rush comp, I don't know how you beat the Shock. You have the best players in all those categories. Like, I think that Gladiators will come out hot out of the gate. I think it'll be close, but still, like, and this is unproven. We haven't seen Muse play in the Overwatch League. Like, Muse versus Super, I will take Super every day of the week. Like, Kevster versus literally anybody else besides Striker. Like, we know Striker's probably going to play, but like any of the other DPS in that lineup for Shock, like I will pick Glister, Nero, who else? Or not
Teo.
Tayo, not Tayo yet. I don't know about Tayo yet, but I really wonder. Well, I wonder what kind of looks we're going to see from the Shock this year. You have to imagine they come out hot for these first couple of games, and then once the rhythm's there and they feel like, and like the top spot is like locked in, maybe we see some more shifts. Or Cressy just has another crazy plan that we have to watch unfold in front of us.
As long as it's not Super Genji, I'll be fine.
Right, like for the Gladiators, I'm like people are talking all about Kevster and stuff like that. I'm like, that's not even a guarantee Kevster plays.
Nah, man, mirror is already
and Bergring, it's one of those things where I could definitely see them coming out with that duo. But I think regardless, I think the Shock win 3-1 on this.
Well, and then Totem, did you have what are you thinking between these two teams? Do you think there's any? Do you think it's another Shock victory, or maybe LA ekes it out?
I have an LA 3-2, as I mentioned. I think this one goes the distance. And, if we are going to get Brawl and it is Ryan Zarya, I understand the thought process between the Ryan battle, but in that case, I do think, Mir will play the Zarya for the Gladiators. Kevser will be on the Echo, and that's going to be enough to kind of offset things. And, for me personally, when it comes to the Shock, I just have to see what their plan is for that DPS rotation, because this is a team who, in the past, have kind of had like that like map specialist type role kind of split between their DPS. So is it going to be a retreat to things like that we saw from them during the championship season or the first championship season? Or is it going to be more straight a 1-2 punch like we saw with Striker and Ons this past season? So it all kind of depends on what their approach is going to be. But the level of competition on the Gladiators definitely leveled up this season. And, anytime you go up against a team that you had played for, there's always a little bit more at stake. So I really want to see how Moth is going to perform against his former team, because Moth is going to have a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge in regards to the way that the Shock prepare for matches like this. So it's going to be really cool to kind of see things from a different perspective on that front.
Looking at game number 3, we talked about it before, Atlanta Reign versus Florida Mayhem. Totem, you had said it, I think that, and we have to check the records on it, Florida hasn't lost against Atlanta since 2019.
I believe that's correct. Let me pull up the results.
This is, again, like Florida lost Fate, and that's about it. Everybody else is still back on this team. Oh, I'm sorry. Chris is gone. You have Slime now.
So you have an upgrade.
Yeah. So
the thing is with this, I mean, I'm picking the Florida Mayhem on this just because I don't know what the hell is going on with the Atlanta Reign. And I think it's more of a not knowing what's happening with the Atlanta Reign and what the team is going to be like over like what the Florida Mayhem. Like, I still think Florida Mayhem are good. I go whooping Gangman style support lineup with my boy Gargoyle in Yaki. I mean, they still have a good team with Florida. It's just we have zero idea what's going on with the Atlanta Reign.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the results. I'm looking at the playoffs. Most recently, we had Florida 3-0 Atlanta. Going back to the Countdown Cup, that was also 3-0 Atlanta. Early in the season, this was back in, looks like July, 3-1 Florida. Okay, still going. Still earlier. May Melee, 3-1 Florida. Okay, so there was a 3-0 for Atlanta in March of 2020. So it's been a while, to say the least. But, to kind of piggyback off of what Edinar was saying, I think the biggest reservation I have for Atlanta, and it's not to say that I think this team is going to be bad, but ever since Hawk and Gator got called up from Atlanta Academy, I don't think we have truly gotten to see what they're actually capable of doing as a tank duo together. Because there have been a lot of changes on that front, specifically on the tank line for Atlanta for these past couple of seasons. And, they've looked okay in some metas, but really terrible in others. So I feel like this team is going to solely perform based off of whatever the hero pool or the meta is at the time. And if it's not something that fits their needs, then this is going to be a team that's going to find themselves kind of in a downward spiral. So I don't know. Like, I would imagine in like ball, Sigma type compositions, this team is probably still going to do fine, but I don't think that they're going to be able to perform at the same level as the Florida Mayhem, knowing that we just haven't really seen them click as of yet. But the talent is still there, but Atlanta's just been a team who we always kind of want to put higher stakes in and then they underdeliver. And that's been a common theme throughout their performances these past few seasons, and it's kind of hard to shake that feeling again going into 2021.
I will say Atlanta does have a player that can just go into God mode and decide that he's going to win a match entirely by himself.
Mhm.
If Kai is feeling dangerous that day and decides that he is going to win no matter what, Atlanta can win. Like I think there's always, you can never 100% count Atlanta out just because we know what that peak is. But it's hard to go with anything other. It's hard for me to go with anything else but a Florida win, considering what consistency Florida has shown and what inconsistency Atlanta has. Honestly, Atlanta is kind of like the Soul Dynasty of North America, if you think about it. Where like we know there's this incredible peak, except Soul actually did it last year. Like there's this incredible peak they can get to, but like they're just content to kind of sit as like a gatekeeper, middle of the road team. Last speaking of Soul, last map to go over. I see that look at it. It's an audio format, but I see what you're giving me.
Yeah.
Last match to review: Philadelphia Fusion versus the Soul Dynasty. This suddenly became the Toby grudge match out of nowhere, which I think is really cool. But Philly Fusion with kind of with a remixed roster a little bit. We've talked about we're likely going to see Hot Butt and Toby. We're going to see Rascal for sure. Coming up against Soul Dynasty, who Soul's coming off of a championship contention, but we don't know if that's the Soul we're going to see today. What I think I have to ask you first, Totem, as the Soul fanboy, that is, as a Soul fanboy of the podcast, where are you feeling with this matchup?
Where am I feeling with this? Conflicted. Because okay, well, it is a Soul Dynasty, and I've made my feelings about Soul known more times than one. I am the resident soulmate. Hell, I'm wearing a Soul Dynasty jersey right now. What dynasty are we going to get? Are we going to get the dynasty who are like, all right, let's see how 2U does on Flex Tank, or are we going to get double shield? Because my thoughts on this team drastically change dependent on what our tank synergy is looking like. Yes, 2U is someone who has been in the system, recently called up. We'll have to see how he fares, and how's he going to stack up to the other off tanks in the league, and how's Hotbug going to rebound as well. But as a Soul fan, knowing that we have seen these changes happen for the Philadelphia Fusion, I still have a lot of room to be concerned just knowing that, pound for pound, if it's double shield, I have more faith in the Dynasty tank lineup, but I don't think that's going to be what we're going to be seeing throughout the weekend. So I actually had the Fusion taking it 3-2 in this case, but I think the Dynasty get that win back the following day when they play Guangzhou, so I'm expecting kind of a split for them this weekend. But I still have faith in Seoul throughout the entirety of the season. I know a lot of people are kind of down on them just from a consistency standpoint throughout the season, where they have had really high highs and really low lows. But this is a team who manages to coast through the middle of the pack and have that breakout potential, which a lot of these other APAC teams have sorely needed for a while now. So they're one of the few that can actually get past that point, unlike a team like the Hunters or the Spark or even the Charge in this case. That's half the damn region, you know?
Right. I mean, I kind of get where you're coming from on this, Totem. I I'm gonna give I think the Fusion are better than what I had them predicted for in week 1.
Mhm.
I actually have them losing to Seoul 3-1.
Okay.
And it's not because of anything to do with Fusion being bad. I think they're gonna take this first week to become a cohesive unit, and then they're gonna step up. Like I have them losing 3-1 to but then coming back and beating the Valiant 3-0 because, well, it's the freaking Valiant. And I think Fusion are gonna step it up from there.
Mhm.
I think it's gonna be like a 1 week, like kind of like misnomer with the Fusion losing to the Soul Dynasty. If it was week 2, week 3, I probably would have the Fusion beating the Dynasty, but the week 1, I'm going with the Dynasty 3-1ing the Fusion just because of the cohesive nature of everything.
I just want to see a tracer off this week between those two teams because that's going to be a big question. But I think for me, storyline wise, last season, for the Dynasty specifically, we saw Creative really step up his game over the course of the season where, when they were making that run, he was definitely turning heads. And that is a player who I had a lot of reservations going into this past season about where now I'm expecting a lot more out of him. And it's kind of the same case with Fitz. We had the
Mhm.
Profits combination that was one of the better DPS duos in the league. Are we going to get to see that same level of play from Fitz? Or is it going to have like those sort of murmurs, which were kind of similar to what we saw from Ons in certain cases with the Shock this past season, where when he was on point, he was one of the best in the league. But if he wasn't dealing, then it's just kind of like, all right, we're folding. So I don't know. I just the question marks definitely add up a little bit more in favor of the Philadelphia Fusion, but I'm still expecting a lot from both of these teams, even out of the gates, regardless of any last minute changes that we could be seeing out of the Fusion camp.
It's hard to pick against them. It's really hard to pick against the Fusion. But I think I agree with Ed though. Like if there's a week that Philadelphia like that, sorry, if there's a week that Seoul could take this, I think this is the week, especially with
Yep.
everything up in flux.
Right on. So outside of that, is there any other like marquee match that you guys are really looking forward to out of week one?
It's impossible for me to say for week 1.
Okay.
It's one of those things where I could pick a marquee matchup in my mind, and it could be 2 of the worst teams in the league.
Mhm.
I
It's
actually
just
was gonna say that.
it's one of those things where we just don't know what's gonna happen because every year we go in and the predictions are wrong.
Right.
And this year will be no different.
Yeah.
I
So
am
there's gonna be a team we think is top 5 that is complete shit, and there's gonna be a team that's top 5, bottom 5, 6 that is gonna be top 8. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
we don't know. So it's like after week 1, it's impossible to know.
Mhm.
I do want to I agree with that. It's going to be impossible, but this is really a goal setting week. That being said, I will be going back and watching the encore performance of Chengdu versus the LA Valiant, just because I want to see what Chengdu looks like. Really, I really want to see how far away 1987 looks. But also, I need to know. I need to see the Valiant with my own eyes and see what we're like, just to get a glimpse of what's going to happen for the rest of the season.
Mhm.
Watch my gameplay. That the that is the same as the Valiant.
So we're gonna be seeing High B playing on completely missing his shots on their
Yeah,
Winston play.
exactly. That is exactly what we will see. So,
uh,
Valiant are really bad.
I think for me, I'm not gonna say I'm looking forward to this matchup, But I feel like this is going to be a very polarizing week for the Toronto Defiant specifically. They open up their
Mhm.
season on Saturday against Vancouver Titans. I don't know about you guys. I'm expecting a sweep there for Toronto.
Yeah.
And then they go up against Atlanta, and I was like, all right, I feel like Atlanta will probably rebound in that game. That one's probably also going to be a 3-0. So it's just like, you're going to get to see like a flash of good from Toronto, and then you're going to get that reality check the very next day, like,
Yeah.
like 27
I'll be
hours
int-
after.
I'll be interested to see with Atlanta whether they go with Aztec or if they go with Lastro.
Mhm.
Like that's going to be the big thing with Toronto that I'm going to keep an eye on.
Right on.
Side note, Onsoon J is a pretty good pick for your budget leagues or if you need a cheap main support. Last I remember, he was in the 40s.
Just pick Crystal. Cheaper than that, and
just don't draft the entirety of the Valiant.
yeah, but just draft Crystal. He's probably their best player, and that's not saying much.
Yeah, I think that pretty much goes without saying at this point. But we'll have to see how things unfold and whether he can keep his attitude in check or not.
Oh man, when Crystal leaves halfway through the season to go back to playing pro PUBG, oh, I can't wait.
Gonna
Be
be
like,
rough.
I'm going pro in a mobile game. Go to hell.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, we do have community leagues set up. We have our pick'ems via the Overwatch League website. We have our draft royale set up for week 1, as well as the budget draft royale also for week 1. All of those links are going to be in the show notes and also available on our Twitter, so be sure to link up with us. Use the right password for the pick'ems to join that, see how you stack up against the rest of the competition in our league. And we hope to see you guys competing alongside us each week via draft buff in these draft royale leagues, whether it's one or both. And in our case, I was talking to Ramses about this on our last episode. When it came to our budget league specifically, there were actually quite a few weeks where our budget league ended up outpointing our draft royale leagues. So I want to keep tabs of how many times that occurs throughout the season, because I know it's going to happen. It really feels inevitable.
Totally gonna happen.
But it's like, who is going to be like that diamond in the rough player that is like 40 or under, or whatever the threshold is on like the average cost, because it's below 50 for sure. Like, who's going to be the one to kind of like push us past that, and are they going to remain kind of like that steady hand throughout the entirety of the season from that perspective of league type?
I mean, to me, it's going to be Crystal. In the budget category, like he's 37 points right now, and unless for some reason the Valiants like pop off and Crystal does amazing and becomes a top 5-10 DPS, he's gonna be your budget DPS to go to each week.
Well, and who's to say that he'll stay budget? Because I think
Right.
what we have seen over the past year is that they could be on a crappy team. As long as they perform like okay, they will go up to at least 50. How many times in a week? How many times in a row can we start Boink? How many times can we start Boink?
0.
Yeah, 0.
I fully expect at one point during this year I will start Jake in a budget league.
I'm not surprised by that at all.
Yeah, Jake's the one. Yeah, don't start Jake this week ever. Like, you literally do not start Jake ever unless like we get into some weird meta where only Junkrat's being played.
Or if they add player coaches as the playable slot. Which is never going to happen. But anyways, that is going to do it for us here tonight on OWL by the numbers. This has been episode number 61. So, it's time to close things out. So if you guys want to help us out, please do us a favor. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. Let us know how we are doing. If there's anything you would like to hear specifically from a fantasy perspective on the show. Obviously, we're aiming basically around 90-ish minutes each week. 30 minutes without Ramses, and then, he'll be here the rest pretty much every week. But, we kind of had our set sort of format. But if there's anything else you guys want to see, we are open here. So on that front, and we will consider adding it onto the show. Now, outside of that, of course, we have ways that you guys can directly support our show. So Ramses, please let them know how they can do just that.
Best thing you can do to help us out is to join our network on Patreon. Tiers start at just $1 a month. You can find everything you need at patreon.com/OWL network. There's a ton of great benefits, and there's a lot of really cool people on there, including our friends Daniel, Owl, and Kasha, not Kasha Ed.
It's Kesha.
Who it's an A, who help make the network grow every month.
And of course, that does help tremendously since we have a couple of shows here, just a few.
Just a few. But I'll go through how you can contact us. So make sure to reach us through email at contact@owlnshow.com. We are on Twitter, and that's at OWL by the numbers. We do have a website you can go to, and that's www.owrecall.com. We are on YouTube at youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We do have a Discord. You can join at discord.me/OWLN show. So, like Toteman said, we do have a few shows, and we stream them live on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLN show. We are a Twitch affiliate, so make sure to help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. And we do podcasts pretty regularly. So Overwatch League Network is currently running a flex schedule, so be sure to follow the Twitter at OWLN show for episode updates. And then we have this show, OWL by the numbers, airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. And then on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific, we have the Heroes Never Die, which is your variety Overwatch show that Totem and I do. You can reach me personally on Twitter, and that's at Ednar83, or on Twitch at twitch.tv/Ednar. Ramses, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at Ramses_OW, and you can find the other show I do covering Overwatch League content at PushPointsPod.
Absolutely. And as for myself, you can find me on Twitter at TimberlyDrunk, as well as Twitch at twitch.tv/TimberlyDrunk. So guys, don't forget to submit your picks in the league pick'ems. Don't forget to set your lineups for your respective leagues, whether it is traditional leagues or your draft royales. And of course, you can find all of the information on our specific leagues for the podcast on our Twitter, as well as via our show notes and on the Discord as well. But best of luck in your fantasy Overwatch League season. Of course, we'll be back every week throughout the entirety of the season. And we'll see if Ed can keep the crown this season, or it's going to come toppling down. Hopefully not as hard as the Valiant.
Oh, God, that is so bad.
Time will tell. But we will see you next week. Enjoy and have a good weekend.
Peace out, y'all.